5 years ago, I entered the Comrades Marathon and I trained for it, and I got sick a few days before. So I ended up seconding a mate of mine. And after he finished, the first thing I told him was how exhausted I was from seconding him. And our guest today has run 30 Comrades Marathons, won 9 of them, set 5 course records. And a few years, around that time, also ran the London to Brighton, which he won 3 times and set a 50-mile world record, which stood for 36 years. Since then, has launched the parkrun in almost 200 locations in Southern Africa with over or about 1 million subscribers, arguably the most successful runner and most influential runner in the history of South Africa. So I'm super honored to introduce you, Bruce. Welcome, Bruce Fordyce.
Yeah, you can introduce me anytime you like. Very overgenerous. You didn't mention the Sydney Marathon, so I deliberately wore the T-shirt, just so you know.
But there we go. Yeah. Did you win that as well?
No. I won in the pub afterwards.
Oh, awesome. So Bruce, there's a struggle story which I love, and I remember you telling the story briefly at one of the book launches way back, and you ran with a black armband during apartheid, and there was something about the cameras and the way they were treating you. Could you tell us that story?
So that was the 1981 Comrades. What happened was in 1981 was 20 years of nationalist government apartheid rule. And the nationalist government decided to celebrate with a whole lot of tank parades and cultural events and fly pasts and politicians in those big, you remember those big Homburg hats, lecturing with their fingers like that and giving speeches. And sadly, Comrades agreed to be one of those events that would celebrate 20 years of apartheid. I don't know why, who was thinking what, but anyway. And at the time, I was a passionate student at Wits, and the campaign at the time for those who were opposed to the idea was no cause to celebrate. So everywhere you saw these T-shirts, no cause to celebrate and whatever. And so a lot of runners withdrew from the race when they saw that they were going to be part of this. But those of us who selfishly, like me, I knew I had a very good chance of winning because I'd had a 2nd and a 3rd place before that, and I was going for the win. We got together and decided we could still run, but we would show our displeasure by wearing black armbands. So that's what we did, and we naively thought that you could just go along and, show your displeasure, and you and I disagree, but we can run. But whoa, we were incredibly unpopular. And I need to emphasize it wasn't just me; it was a group of about 50 or 60 people in the race. But I was the high-profile one because I was out in front. And yeah, I got hit with a couple of tomatoes and an egg, and there was one family of, I don't know, they must have been a Catholic family. They had about 6 children, and they lined up in the side like the Von Trapp family singers from Sound of Music. They were lined up, and I went past. They went boo, 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 like that, and they booed me. And so I was a very unpopular winner, and it was very difficult for the SABC to cover the race without showing the armband, because here's this blooming Betoge communist Witsie leading. And so what they did was that they tried to film me from the side that didn't have the armband on, because it was on mine. But all I did was when I saw the camera turn, I would take the armband off and put it on the other arm. And then what they didn't know was in the lead vehicle, the cameraman was an old schoolmate of mine, Peter Brady. And his sympathies were the same as mine. So he did his utmost to film my armband. And so, yeah, so that was it. I was a very unpopular winner of the race, but not on Robben Island, as Nelson Mandela once told me many years later. There I was a popular winner.
Awesome. So were there any runners who you think could have been super great, who never got a chance to compete during that period?
Oh, I'm sure there were hundreds, who just simply, the daily grind and struggle of trying to stay alive interfered with any dreams of becoming a full-time or certainly a winning athlete. Yeah. I was still teaching at Wits. I was in the archaeology department, and I was still teaching. But when you're an academic or a student studying, you have to work hard, but there's plenty of time to organize your training around that. And fairly soon after I'd come 2nd and 3rd in Comrades, I picked up a sports bursary from Wits University, 1,000 Rand, which was quite a lot of money in those days.
Yeah.
And another person they gave a bursary to a couple of years later was Mark Pleikes, and he went on to be marathon world champion. So
Wow.
Some of those, I'm switching this off immediately. Some of those bursaries were very well spent. Sorry.
No,
Rookie
that's fine.
error. Rookie error.
So
but
I
anyway.
No, that's fine. Just so
Yeah.
you know, like I was interviewing Tim Noakes the other day, and someone came to drop something at his house and couldn't get in. So he was like knocking on the window while Tim was in the interview. So he got up. He got up for 5 minutes and went and got the door, and we could hear him in the background speaking to the guy.
Yeah. But Tim's like, he's a true academic.
Yeah.
Yeah, his mind is elsewhere.
Yeah. So in fact, I've been reading your book.
Yeah.
Which is super cool. I love the story you told about the Star Wars movie when you all thought you were going to get to see a different type of movie. It's amazing. So yeah, for those of you who haven't read this, highly recommend.
Thank you.
Yeah, and I'll let you talk more about it in detail later. But the thing that stood out to me, absolutely, shameless self-promotion is what you've got to do.
Shameless.
Yeah. So, but the story is about your first comrades and the training for it and everything. Yeah. And when I was interviewing Tim, he said that you were basically about to die in the last 5Ks, and your dad gave you a Coke, and that gave you the push to get over the end of the line, or something along the lines of a little bit of Coke, like save the day.
Yeah. So actually, it wasn't my first comrades. Okay. In the time of my first comrades, there was a doctor at Wits, Ivan Cohen, who was doing a lot of research into dehydration. We all thought that dehydration was the great enemy. So he was doing research into which fluids get drained from the stomach fastest to fight dehydration. And we didn't, in those days, understand that if you're carbohydrate dependent, as we all were, you have to take carbohydrates to race, because it's like you're dependent on cocaine and you don't have your cocaine, so you better get some. So it was actually my third comrades, 1979. When I got to Polly Shorts, I moved into third place, and I had been flying, and then obviously it's Polly Short, so it's a toughie, but it's actually my stepfather, who was a doctor as well, Rolly Whittaker, and a runner. He saw me going grey, and he said, "Don't tell Bruce." He took a bottle of Coke that I used to run on, kind of a mixture of Coke and water, which was so flat Coke. But without telling me, he added about 3 or 4 spoonfuls of table sugar to it. And I just changed gear. I shot up the second half of that hill, and I shot all the way to the finish. And I knew when my seconds came out to me, and listen, from the top of Polly Shorts, it's only about 2 more times they can see you. But when they came out to me, I said, I want that bottle. I don't want any other bottle. I want that one, because I knew. And then after the race, Tim contacted me and said, okay, Bruce, you were the only runner that day whose second half was faster than his first half, and your second half was markedly faster. What did you do? So I told him. And so Tim and I and a marathon runner called Bernie Rose went on to create, because Tim said, well, sugar's great, but they're much more effective sugars like corn sugar. So I don't know what we did to ourselves in terms of the Alzheimer's we're going to get later on in life, as we fried 1 billion brain cells each. But so we brought out this drink, this thing, which the gels, we were the very first gels, unflavored, called
like the goo that you get now.
Yeah, the goos. And so the FRN that we brought out stood for Fordyce, Rose, and Noakes. And that was, a company made it, and we got a small percentage. I know Tim unselfishly would have donated it towards his research stuff, but as a student, I was very grateful for the money. And so that was what we ran on in those days. Yeah.
That's amazing. And so tell me about the nutrition philosophy, sort of, because you had long periods of training before a race, and then you would have had like what you do in the last couple of days before the race and then on the race. So what was the kind of like daily bread, as it were, as a training athlete?
So I trained throughout the year with this to have a steady base. So that would be 120 Ks a week. For me, that was nothing. It's like 120 Ks a week, doing in my off season, doing as much speed work as I could. So because I was aware as an ultramarathon runner that my vulnerability lay in that I was slow compared to the faster marathon. I was running against Johnny Halberstadt, those Ty Kevin Shaw, they were 2:10 marathon runners, 65-minute half marathoners. I was at 2:17, and I just needed to close that gap. So I did a lot of like B League track races. You'd find me on a Friday night running a 3,000-meter race with all the stars of these days, your Humphrey and Dion Brummer and Matthews Tamani, all of those guys. And I was always proud of the fact that it didn't lap me. But it was very good for me. And then, so that would be my off season. But when the main season came, 12 weeks to go, about 10 to 12 weeks to go, then I would jump it up to 160, 220 kilometers a week. So that's twice a day, morning, evening. And then as it got closer to the race, then I would start throwing a bit of quality to sharpen up. So I didn't have to do a long run to find out whether I was ready for Comrades. I didn't need to do a 60K, although I did do 60K training runs very slowly, but I didn't need to do one fast to find out that I was ready to run Comrades. What I needed to do was break 30 minutes for 10Ks. And that I would do quite regularly, like at 29:50. If I could do 3 minutes a K for 10, then I knew I was ready for Comrades. And so that I would bump it up. But then I also was a huge fan of a long taper. So 3 weeks before race day, I would start to cut my mileage drastically. It's still doing the quality, so I'm staying sharp, cut the mileage. And then with 1 week to go, I used to do with a few of my friends a thing called the Sultan diet. The Sultan diet was a diet.
You mentioned that in the book, Yeah.
The Swedish long-distance cyclists invented it, and it was brought into running by one of the great heroes of marathon running, who sadly had just recently died, Dr. Ron Hill. And notice I'm saying doctor because he had a PhD in chemistry. And he brought it into his own marathon running, and he swore by it. And that is that you go for a last longish, like a 25 kilometer, 7 days to go training run, where you deplete all your glycogen stores. And then for the next 3 days, you cut out all carbohydrates in your diet, and you carry on running. So essentially you go banting, but he would never have known of that expression. None of us would have. And that was for us the tough phase. I could never have imagined trying. I can't imagine, in those days, I could not have imagined trying to live on that kind of a diet for more than 3 days. I was nearly demented after 3 days. And what I did with the discipline is every time I saw something that I wanted to eat carbohydrate-wise, I would buy it. So I would buy a jam donut, but I would put it in the fridge. And I would buy a block of chocolate and I put it in the fridge. I'm not eating. And then on the fourth day, you switch and you stop training altogether and you just eat carbohydrates. You don't pig out, but every time you have a meal, you eat carbohydrates. And the idea was that your carbohydrate stores loaded. You had a liver with an excessive load of glycogen, and now you've got an extra big fuel tank for the 90 Ks. Now, I have no idea why it worked, but I wrote in my book about how I understood how Iron Age peoples smelted iron. And when they smelted iron, they did all the correct scientific steps, like hardwood. They used bellows to get the oxygen in. They used termite mound earth to make their kiln, because that can take ferocious heat. But then they also did some steps that are not necessary to smelt iron, like they put mooties in and they drank beer and no women were allowed to be present. But they got the recipe right every time and they smelted iron. So they didn't leave out a step. So I don't know if the diet worked or not, but I got the recipe right every single time. So I didn't want to leave that out. And Ron Hill swore by it. He swore by it. And on the diet, back in those days, he won the Commonwealth Games, the European Champs, the Boston Marathon, and the only one that he failed on was the Olympic Marathon. Why? Because the 3 days of the diet, of the carbo loading phase, the Israeli athletes massacre happened in 1972. And the Olympic Committee made an extra day of no athletics, mourning the dead Israeli athletes. And so Ron was on 4 days. He still blamed, he had to go 4 days carbo high. He said he felt heavy. Because, of course, every gram, I don't know, I'm not that, but every gram of carbohydrate you load a gram of water. So it's kind of...
It's 4, actually, yeah. So it's...
Yeah, so there you go.
Yeah.
Well, that worked for me perfectly, and I never changed it. And I smelted iron every time.
That's amazing, because boxers do that as well. And in fact, like fitness models, when people get super ripped for photographs, they go keto for like 3 or 4 days.
Yes.
And then the day before the shoot, they carb up, and it just pumps all their muscles, but they dehydrate as well. So
I can say this. You see, I don't know, because the last 3 days I didn't run on the carbs. So by the time you get to race day, you're champing at the bit to go. You just want to run because you haven't had a run for 3 days. So I don't know whether that was the key, but it worked.
Yeah, that's amazing. So I mean, it's torture though. Like it's just running, basically opening the taps and running out for 50 Ks to empty your muscles. Like what's it like when you hit the wall at the end of that run?
Well, then, of course, then what you do, of course, is then you take the high carbs while you're running. You take the Fordyce, Rose and Noakes FRN, and you just keep taking that all the way through to the end. You know, and so then you, but that's because you're carbohydrate dependent in those days, desperately so.
So what are you eating in a 220K week of running?
You know, I was a student. So, I mean, our favorite meal was to go to the Wits canteen, sit around playing cards, talking about the girls, and eating slap chips and gravy. So you could get a huge plate of chips and you put salt, and then you got this gravy, which was probably just actually corn, you know, like corn flour or something. With some cubes in it. But we chucked that on, and then we would have coffee with about 3 spoons of sugar. And I was a typical student. A double cheeseburger was fantastic. If I went home to visit the parents, then I'd eat mom's food, you know. But just high carbs back in those days. And then, of course, being a student, there was a place called the Devonshire Pub. The Devonshire Pub was bad news.
So lots of carbs consumed there as well.
Lots of carbs. Coming home, because when I was postgraduate, then I started living in a flat in Braamfontein. And I could still remember we would come home at by 1 o'clock in the morning, 2 o'clock in the morning, singing, "Ayo, ayo, daylight come and I wanna, hey, Mr. Tallyman, tally me banana." We were experts.
Oh, that's classic. So, and then what about, so on the race, it was basically Coke and water, and then
going stronger and stronger carbs. Stronger and stronger.
More and more sugar sort of as it got further. Yeah. And what about recovery? Was there a specific recovery regime, anything?
Beef curry and rice, because we're in India. I mean, in the Indian part of Durban. So I'd have a curry.
What is it? A bunny chow, a solid bunny when you're in Durban.
Yeah, something like that. You see, because I was born in the Far East, so you can't frighten me with chili. You can bring mother-in-law's Hellfire Vindaloo, and there'll be one bead of sweat. You know, I'm not Mrs. Ball's extra hot. It's just got more vinegar in it. There's no chili in there.
So now, No. So I don't actually know when you retired from competitive running, but there was obviously a transition over the years where you sort of changed your diet.
Well, and then I kind of, when I lost Comrades for the first time, the last one that I won, my sister lives in London, and she had never been out to see me. So the last one that I won, 1990, she came out to watch me run Comrades, and the Comrades Association treated her like a VIP, which was wonderful. They put her in the lead vehicle, and she watched the whole race. And she was the first one to hug me when I crossed the line. But she still reminds me that when I crossed the line and I hugged her, I said, "It's over. I won't win another one." Because that one I was very lucky to win. Mark Page had an insurmountable lead, and I was not going to catch him, but then he started walking. And then when I saw him on Polly Shorts, but I'd given up. I was settling for second, and then I saw him on Polly Shorts. And when I saw him, that was like the red rag, you know, and I was off. And then I got him and I passed him. And so, but I knew that race was given to me. I didn't win it. It was given to me.
Just hang on a second. Let's just go and unpack that for a second here. If he bombed out because he pushed it too hard or wasn't prepared enough to finish the whole race, doesn't that mean that you won fair and square?
Yes, but I think Mark, he might have. So what happened was he was 10 minutes ahead of me at one stage, and then the gap went to 8 minutes, and then it went to 6 minutes. So maybe the pressure of knowing that Fordyce is coming might have got to him a little bit. And he was very inexperienced. If he'd had a decent team of seconds with him, I'll tell you, Alberto Salazar, when he won in 1994, he was broken, absolutely broken, going up Polly Shorts. And Nick Bester was coming like a train. But he had Ray Wixell seconding him. And Ray Wixell is an athlete and a runner. And Ray said, "Yes, he's catching you, Alberto, but if you just don't walk, he will run out of real estate to catch you. He will run out of distance." And so that's what Alberto did. He just hung in, you know. So I think maybe if somebody had talked Mark through, he might have. You get to the top of what you see. I caught him near the top of Polly Shorts, and then I went past him. If you can get over the crest of Polly Shorts, it's kind of 6-7 Ks downhill and well, there are a couple of hills, but you're kind of home and dry if you can get there, because the person chasing
a mental barrier to get over.
Yeah, but you've got to get over that. Yeah.
Okay. And so, so then after that, you sort of tapered off slightly. And then,
yeah, and then I carried on running, and I'd still raced a bit, but it was over at Comrades and things like that. So I wasn't going to get a marathon PB. In fact, the PBs were over. And so then I've always been in running for life. I'm not going to stop. At the moment, I've got a stress fractured ankle from the 2 oceans, and I've got no cartilage in my right knee. My family wants me to stop, and I said, "Do you want me to stop? Because then I'll be the grumpiest, worst, most unbearable person to live with. Just let me hobble around. At least I'm just not going to do any ultras, and stuff like that."
Yeah. So what happened when you discovered banting? So the only reason I know you discovered banting is because I actually met you at a launch in 2013 or 14.
Yeah, so what happened was, as with all of us, just middle age spread. I mean, I just started to get larger and heavier, and I couldn't believe it, because all my life I had been absolutely, the skinniest guy. I loved my rugby at school. What was I? I was a number 9. I was a scrum half. That's the only position you can put me. The smallest guy, the one who causes the most trouble, like the Jack Russell, but he doesn't do any of the action in the scrum. And then suddenly this thing started happening to me where I just was getting heavier, and I carried on. By the way, as you said in your introduction, I ran 30 Comrades. Well, some of them I did in 10 hours with buddies and whatever. Not worried about my time, but there was a photograph of me crossing the line in the 2 oceans, and I looked at it and I thought, you've got a boop, because I had just crossed the line, and as you cross the line, I'd relax.
Yeah.
I had this boop, and I thought, nah, that's not a boop. What it is, it's your number. Your race number has curled round and folded around. It's just, and the shadow. And then I looked at it a bit more closely, and I thought, you've got a boop. And then there was a great photograph of a whole bunch of us had gone on holiday, great friends in Mozambique, and there was a photograph of my mate Gary Harlow coming out of the water after doing some body surfing. And he looked strong but big, and I said, what a great picture of Gary. And Jill, my wife, said, no, Bruce, that's a photo of you. Oh my God. Okay. So, and then I went, and then I used to have an annual executive medical, and my doctor at the time looked and said, no, Bruce, as usual, all your markers, everything's wonderful, but we just can see that your liver's starting to take a bit of a hammering. And I thought, well, that's alcohol. And then I thought, no, it isn't, because I've actually been going through quite a quiet few weeks. It's actually my liver's trying to cope with the carbohydrates I'm hitting it with. And then all these things came together. I don't know what, I'm chatting to Tim and then chatting to Sean Micklejohn, who won the 95 Comrades. He got as large as anything. He ran 20 Comrades, then he gave up. He's told his family, I've won it, I've reached a dream, I've got several gold medals, I'm retiring after 20. And after 6 years, he was enormous. And he went back to his family and said, guys, I have to run again, and I have to diet. And I saw him at a Comrades function, and he'd got thin again. I said, Sean, what have you done? And he said, Bruce, at our age, we have to diet. We have to think about it. And I thought, I don't get it. I'll just, being lazy, I'll double my mileage, I'll go start running again. And it didn't work. And so one day, I wish I had marked the day. I just came down for my morning run, and I always had a cup of coffee, 2 or 3 spoons of sugar. And I just thought, this morning, no sugar. And I hated it. And I went out and I ran, came down the next morning. For 2 weeks, I hated it. Hated no sugar in my tea or coffee. But the results, I wish I could say this to people who are struggling. The results are instantaneous. They're not 3 months from now, you're going to, it's instant. I mean, within a week, I had lost 2 kgs just by giving up the sugar in my tea and coffee. My times in those days at the Rockies time trial on a Saturday morning at Zoo Lake, 5Ks, my times came down by 2 minutes. My recovery afterwards was incredible. So then I was so super excited. I said, okay, let's give up bread. Even better results. Let's give up. Okay, let's go the whole hog. No more pasta, no more potatoes, none of that stuff. Unbelievable. Straight.
That's like changing religions for the history that you've had. That's like going against every bit of sort of theory you've ever followed.
Every single thing. We have been lied to for just decades. And the
Wow.
worst thing about it, here's how stupid I am. I taught the subject. I'm an archaeologist. Philip Tobias, one of the world's great experts on the early hominids, lectured me. What were we? Hunter-gatherers. What are we still? Hunter-gatherers. Our digestive systems over millions of years have not suddenly got used to a Chelsea bun. These digestive systems are designed to eat animals, and especially we've got the excavations of the fires. We cracked open the bones of the animals and ate the marrow. And yes, some berries and bitter fruits in season and the odd leafy green vegetables or something. But what we really wanted, and we were the greatest hunters ever because we chased after animals and ran them into exhaustion. We can sweat. We've got great springs and ligaments and tendons and whatever. And we've forgotten it. We've forgotten it. And now the powers that they don't want us to find out.
So there's
in junk food and in carbohydrates.
Pharmaceuticals.
You got to have your five vegetables and fruits a day.
Absolutely.
And the health breakfast they serve you at breakfast. What's it?
11 vitamins, minerals, and iron.
And whatever. That's the least healthy thing on the breakfast menu. But anyway, listen.
Yes.
But anyway, worked for me. And I don't want to sound evangelical, because people can get so upset. And I'm not so rude that if I came to your place and you have made me a pasta, I will eat it and I'll enjoy it. But the next day I'm back on the program. And then I'm a hypocrite because, as I've already hinted a couple of times, I enjoy the odd glass of wine or the odd glass of whiskey or whatever. So there's quite a lot of sugars in those things.
Well, it's not Alcoholics Anonymous. It's being generally healthier. So making more healthy decisions more often, I think, is really what the key is, and understanding what a healthy decision even is. Yeah.
Obviously, if you're at the Pirates Club and it's the Springboks against England, 2019, and there's 5 minutes to go and Cheslin Colby scores that brilliant try, there's going to be a few drinks.
Exactly. Can we talk about performance mindset for a bit? I'm keen to hear about your experience of the pain cave, and perhaps you could talk about, what your visualizations were, if any, during training, because especially with a race so long and such a long build-up, what is going through your mind? What are you thinking about when you're planning your training and you're thinking about getting ready for a race?
So I used to do a little bit of mental rehearsal stuff, but it had to be real. So it would be let's say it would be in early May. If you're talking about a Comrades, it's end of May or 1st of June, sometime like that. Then while I was running, but it wouldn't be like I would be running on my own. I used to do a midweek Wednesday run of about 25 to 30 Ks in the afternoon. Most of my running actually was evening running, afternoon, evening. And then it would get dark because it's beginning of winter. And I would run around, be running on familiar streets or whatever and going nicely. I mean, you see, so I would know I'm very fit. I'm very thin. I'm very fit. And one of my tests was I like to tap each of my fingers with my thumb while I was running. That means I'm very relaxed. I'm not, when you like that, you bunched up and you tight here, but I was loose and I did that play. And then my mind would just wander and I would say, okay, poly shorts. But it wasn't like, oh, you're going to do that today. It would just happen, accident, poly shorts. And I would do poly shorts in my mind. Here I am, and not impossible because nobody sprints up poly shorts, but there, 1 foot in front of the other. I'm just not stopping. There's the lead vehicle with the press. There's the TV camera. Here's some of the spectators, the side of the road clapping. I could smell the braai smoke, but I'm going up to the top of polys. And I promise you, I'd get there on race day. And on race day, I would get goosebumps and I think, I've been here before. I've been here before already in my mind, and I know what I've got to do. Yes, there's a little bit of a cramp coming, but that's fine. Just don't stop. So I would do stuff like that. I always had music. I'd have a favorite theme music for the year. Could be anything from classical to reggae. And then my training diaries. Funny enough, I have one right here. This is there you are. That's a Fordyce training diary. Also, I don't put it down on computers or something like that because one day, and it's all in there. You see, so it's all there. It is. Oops.
So that's journaling about your experience and training.
I've got every single one. What's this one? 79 to 81. So that's winning comrades. That's there. There's what I wrote about winning comrades. See in red. Those are my notes about how I won. And then in the beginning, I would, like a prisoner who's counting all the days until he gets freed from jail, I would tally up all my Ks, you see. And when I knew that I had got to X number of Ks by May, then you're ready to run.
Now, did anyone teach you that?
Sorry?
Did anyone teach you that?
No. I just started from day one. That's in my book. My first run was 10 minutes around the Wits rugby fields. I recorded that.
That's insane. Do you know that like the high performance coaches and the Stoics, if you go online and you're like, what makes greatness? They'll tell you now, like, you need a journal and you need to be crossing off things. And Stoicism is all about like knowing that you're going to die. So that's quite profound, actually, that you're doing that in the 80s.
Yeah. 70s.
Yeah.
76.
That's insane. And then so a lot of people think that there's something genetically different about the people who win. And I'm always surprised to hear about athletes who have suffered with injuries and pain. And now I've decided that actually people who win just can just take more pain than the people who don't. So I don't know if you've got any stories about when you had to push through the pain cave and just make it happen. Oh, I think I've just gone offline.
Oh, okay. I'm back. Can you hear me?
Okay, cool. Yeah, I got you.
So I've only discovered now that I ran 21 Ks at the Two Oceans with a stress fracture of my left fibula. So there was quite a lot of pain. And I just kept going. I just thought, just suck it up and go. And I wasn't running fast. I was running with two friends of mine who were doing their first ever half marathon, first ever Two Oceans. And so there was a fair bit of walking when they needed to walk. And I had I was able to get a laugh at the top of Southern Cross Drive. I bumped into Tox van der Linde, who was doing commentary up there. I mean, can you imagine getting a Springbok prop to talk to runners? So he saw me and he spotted me and he said, "How's it, Bruce?" He said, "Oh, how are you going?" I said, No, Tox, I can't dilly-dally and chat here. This is my second lap. I'm leading. And he wasn't sure whether to believe me or not.
Oh, that's great. They planted a psychological time bomb at the top of Southern Cross this year, because usually you get to the top of Southern Cross and that's kind of like the heavy lifting out of the way.
Yeah, then they made us go left.
Turn up the hill.
That little kink. But anyway, so I mean, I obviously with pain, there is, I mean, but one of the things I used to say to myself, if you're leading and you're hurting, imagine how the other guys are also hurting, So it's kind of, and then I've got to say, every now and again, I'm sure it must be like a golfer who has 2 years of the worst golf he's ever experienced in his life, and then one day he gets a birdie or a hole in one or a fabulous round where he equals par or something. So every now and again in running, you get one of those where you just nothing goes wrong. And so if I had to go back in 1983, you could have made the race 10 Ks longer. I would have just carried on. And I was doing 3.5 minutes a K at the end, just nothing. I was waving at the crowd. My girlfriend at the time ran out. I gave her a kiss. When you can do that kind of thing, then it's like perfect. And then I think 86 also had a fantastic run. 88 had a great run. But then the bad ones, like 82, 82 against Alan Robb. Oh, my dad held me up at the finish. So 81 was bad because that was the armband with the 85, I landed up on the drip, so it's just, it depends. Was it a hot day? Was it a cold day? What were the tactics like? But what I find is that in most cases, champions will find a way to win. So if you look at the most successful sports team of all time, it's the All Blacks. Their winning ratio compared to anything, you can bring in baseball, basketball, cricket, anything. The All Blacks win ratio, I know recently they've lost a few, but their win ratio is so high, and they have that ability in the last 20 minutes to go from being behind to just digging out a win, even if it's a bad win, it's an ugly win. They will just do it. So sometimes I think that's where winners are very good at just making it happen in the end. I think when I caught Mark Page in that 1990 Comrades, he probably got concerned when his second started saying, I'm coming. And then I was unkind because when I saw him, his wife had just come back from being with him with a bottle. And I did this. Oops, I did this with an imaginary gun. I went like that in front of her, which wasn't a kind thing to do. And I'm a nice guy, but I'm a horribly competitive if I've decided to be competitive, yeah.
And so where do you find that extra gear? Is there a certain thing that you tell yourself, or is are there any sentences that come up for you? What's the narrative going on in your mind when you find that gear?
So for me, it was always just to try and get 3 minutes. If I could get 3-minute lead in Comrades, that is, if I could get 3 minutes, because 3 minutes was almost a kilometer. And the other thing was just get out of sight. Just get out of sight. So I might work very hard to get around the next bend so that when he comes, you're not there. And it's little things like when you take a sponge and you sponge or whatever and you have a drink, you don't drop it. You drop it on the road, it's lying there. It's a sign, and it's got water oozing out of it. It's a sign you're just there. I don't like to pollute, but you throw it in the bush so that when he comes, there's nothing. You're gone. There's no sign that you were ever there. You're gone. You see, so start to give up. And in fact, I was not great to Mark that year because he's a teammate. But when I caught him, he said, "Who's coming?" And I said, "Isaiah Charlie's coming. He's coming like a train, Mark." So that made Mark start thinking, "Can I hang on to second?"
Yeah.
Meanwhile, I didn't know where Hosea was. He could have been anywhere. I just thought of a name. I think no, Horsa ended up being second. Yeah, he caught Mark too. Yeah. So, but I didn't know. I just I had to think of a run and make him worried.
That's hilarious. So now you're trying to teach, well, not trying. Now you launched a business helping other athletes, even start their first Comrades. And I think, that's what this book's about. So why don't you tell me a little bit about why you wrote this book and who it's for?
Okay, so don't get me on the subject of COVID, because I promise you this is not about that. But I can tell you, when everyone says all the disaster because of COVID and because of the pandemic, the disaster was because of lockdown that governments put us in. Lockdowns created it, not the pandemic. Lockdowns all over the world, millions of people lost their jobs. Unbelievable, catastrophic decisions by government and scientists. So I've learned who to trust, and there's a lot of scientists who you'll never trust again. But anyway, for me, the one good thing that came out of it was I had nothing to do, so I wrote this book. And it's I could have written a book about how to win, but then I'm going to lose half my audience, my readership immediately. So I thought, no, just write about you as an ordinary guy running your first Comrade. Your first Comrade, no idea you're going to win it one day, and you made it a project. And so what I did was I took these very self-same training diaries and I just transcribed what I did. So my first run was 10 minutes around the Wits Rugby Field, June the 8th, 1976. And I could only run for 10 minutes. I didn't want to lose weight. I didn't want to get fit. I had one goal, to run the Comrades by chance a year later, because it was June the 8th. The next Comrades was May the 31st. And so I had a year to do that project. And so I wrote all that down. And then I put next to it notes like, this is a good idea. This is not a good idea. This is really foolish. And here I've got a really bad sore throat, but I'm carrying on running. What am I doing? This is really, and this is a fantastic idea. And here you can see I'm getting fitter. So I did all that. And then I thought, but it's very dry and dull. So you're correct. I decided no to go and put in all the stories. So I put in all the stories of what happened at the time, you see, and like the movie.
Yeah.
When we thought we were going to see an interesting movie in men's wears at Pitts, and instead it was Star Wars, and the politics of the time, because 10 days after I started running, 8 days later was June the 16th, and I got horribly caught up in that whole action. So I put all that stuff down into it, and I'm quite proud of it. It's kind of who my heroes were, who inspired me, but mainly advice on how to run your first Comrades and what I did. And then obviously, because I chose my parents correctly, I'm genetically suited. I ran a silver first time. I mean, I ran a 6:45.
Did you know you were a runner? Did you know you could be good at running when you started out?
I was always, at school athletics, I would win the teacher would say, Fordyce, you're good at the long stuff, so you're doing the 5,000. Then I would win it. But, winning at school, win the school cross country, I won that, but winning at Woodmead School for hippies, artists, poets, and general academics of the world, that's what they've all become. All my schoolmates say, thank goodness for you, Bruce, because we needed one sports element and you're the guy. So winning there doesn't tell you that you're going to win internationally. That's a different kettle of fish completely. So, but I knew that I was talented. But, Alan Robb that year, he beat me by an hour. So Alan won the 77 Comrades, which was my first. And I remember we invited him when I was at Wits, we invited him to be a speaker about 2 weeks before Comrades. And I remember just staring at him, thinking, he looks so ordinary, but he's won this race already. He won it once by the, he's won it. What's he got? I remember just, why? He just looks so ordinary. But,
well, that's what I loved about the book, because I think that's the thing is when we see people who have done great things, we think that there's something extraordinary about their lives, like they had an opportunity that we didn't have. And what's so cool about this book, which I'm holding up again for those of you who didn't see it, is that it is so human. So you hear like you're literally a youngster studying and you talk about the parties and you just had this goal and you like rammed it into your already busy life. So I think that's super cool. I like that it's like that and not just a training schedule for someone to pick up.
And then of course after that I was completely hooked. So after as with all Comrades Runner, never ever again with other bad words. And then 2 days later you're thinking, I wonder what the down run's like.
Yeah. So tell us about the coaching business that you're running at the moment.
Yeah. So then what happened is a mate of mine, Ian Mooreshead, who is a coach, got together with me and he said, Bruce, please, will you lend me your diaries, your training diaries? And I want to go through them and see how you train. And he came back to me and he said, I've got it. He said, I can distill everything you've done and you've done it correctly, obviously. And we can set up a thing called Fordyce Fusion, which is we coach everybody from people who just want to finish a 10K to Comrades Marathon gold medalists, and it's been going unbelievably well. My real test, because I've had some skin in the game, is my nephew Robbie, and I know he wouldn't mind me saying this, but my nephew Robbie 3 years ago was down and out with an absolutely catastrophic alcohol and drug problem, and he got himself right. He got himself right from that. He got out of it. Then he wanted a project, and that lovely lady running. That's me in the London to Brighton. That lovely lady next to me is my sister Una, seconding me.
All right.
She's smiling because she's run 70 meters. I'm a bit grumpy because I've run 70 Ks at that stage. Anyway, so we got Robbie through Paris Marathon. This is a guy who was down and out. And 3 years later, Paris Marathon, 2:58.
Whoa.
Okay. So obviously he's got the genetics, he's my nephew. But now he'll go 2:45 next time. And he was upset. He got that competitive because my first standard marathon was 2:45. And he was looking at it. I know he was looking at it. But I told him, Robbie, 2:45 at your stage with what you've done to yourself is a bridge too far. But you'll get there, but not in one step,
Yeah. And so how does the coaching work? Is it online, remote?
Well, the people apply and then we use my principles and we coach them. We send them programs and then we monitor how they're going. And then we've just had the most wonderful feedback. Just thank you, Bruce. Thank you, Ian. We've got another coach coming on board, Frank Asensio. Frank is helping as well. We're going to be taking a group of Comrades runners in July to run the Comrades route over 3 days. So we'll do a 30 or something and a something, to run the 90 Ks. And we will go over every inch of the route and I'll chat to the guys and tell them, this is what I would do at this stage, hang back here, whatever, or don't, whatever you do when you get to Botha's Hill, do not take off because you're going to hammer your quads. And when you get to Fields Hill, do not take off. So we'll take them through the route, and Yeah, and it's been incredibly rewarding. And it's at this stage, it's definitely not about making money because we're very much in our infancy. But hopefully, we'll get to a stage where we can. And I've never been driven much by money. I'm more driven by contribution and being happy. And a lot of people, and to me, being happy is when a stranger comes up to you and hugs you and says, "Bruce, thank you for parkrun. You changed my life." You can't pay the money for that. You cannot pay the money for that, and it happens, and you get some criticism as well, but I think
it means you're noticeable. If people hate you, it means it means you're doing something that's noticeable. Yeah.
Well, I think as Churchill said, you haven't lived a life unless you've got some enemies.
Yeah. Yeah, that's true. Well, Bruce, so I popped the link in the stream, so anyone watching in whichever platform, you can find out more at fordycefusion.com. Bruce, it's been an honor chatting to you. Thanks so much for being so generous. And I hope to see you on the next loop of Two Oceans, and maybe one day at the finish line of Comrades.
Why one day?
I've got two young kids, so that's my excuse I'm holding on to for a while, just because of the time
that's your
it takes
excuse
away.
to get out.
Yeah.
Get away.
All right, we'll take this.
Those two young kids one day are going to say, "Doctor, where's the form? I'll sign it." Okay, switch the machine off. You need to. And Dad, I love you, but where there's a will, I want to be in it.
Yeah, exactly. Awesome. Thanks so much.
You do yourself a favor. It's a life-altering. So last thing I called it Winged Messenger, and it sounds like a very pretentious title, but it isn't, because the Comrades logo, this little chap here, is Hermes, and he was the winged messenger of the Greek gods, and that's the Comrades badge, the Comrades logo. That's what's engraved on the medal. Hermes was the Greek god of the roads, but he was the winged messenger, and he was the only god who had the power to go from the world of the past to the world of the future, to go to the world of the dead to the world of the living. And so he could bring you messages from your ancestors, but he could also bring you messages from the old you to the new you. And I always say to people, once you've run Comrades, you changed forever. You're not the same person after you finish. You just never are. You're bolder, you're braver, you're stronger, you understand you can do almost anything you want, and you become a winged messenger. So that's why I called it that. So it wasn't like a pretentious title.
That is a compelling pitch. I'm not going to lie. Okay, Bruce, I'll let you go. Thanks so much again.